Mountaineer Nation, let's ride.
But Don Nealon's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football. Here is Harrison trouble, stiff arms, a would-be tackler, comes down over the 25 to 20, goes around about it to 15 to 10 to 5, a touchdown West Virginia, he did it!
Fakes the Slater, one-on-one with a defender, look at Pat White!
West Virginia football, you know what that's about, they don't know what it's about, West Virginia football, we're all our table.
Let them know. Leave no doubt tonight. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another Q&A stream here on the Country Roads webcast. I had heard about the Raekwon Battle transfer news for West Virginia. Of course, as you can tell by the thumbnail and kind of the topic of the video, we're going to get into the transfers that West Virginia got today and, of course, catch up on some other WVU news topics and get your all's thoughts, questions, comments along the way, as always, here on these Q&A streams. But what happened was I was at work earlier today, heard about the Raekwon Battle news. I was like, okay, I'll make a video on that when I get home. Then I'm on my way home, and about that time, I hear the news of the transfer on the, or excuse me, it was the other way around. I heard about the Jalen Ellis news last night, and then I had to work early today, so I was going to make a video about that today. And then I heard about the Raekwon Battle news when I was about to be on my way home from work. So I was like, I'm just going to wait, do a live stream later, talk about them both, give my thoughts, get your all's thoughts, and then we can talk about what other news topics that have kind of happened as well, because these Q&A streams have been really fun, throughout the spring. So I figured, why not just do it as another one, talk about the transfers, talk about some other news topics as well. West Virginia had other news on the transfer side, on the more negative end, on the football side as well, kind of the first transfer out there. But like we said, we're going to start seeing those now that spring ball's over and the transfer portal window is currently open, I think, for at least a few more days. I think it's open till the 30th, or maybe it's open till the 1st of May. Not 100% sure. The transfer window was originally May 1st to May 15th, but then they moved it up, and I think it's April 15th, April 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to let some people roll in here before we touch on the transfer news specifically, both on the basketball and the football transfers, a couple of those coming in. And then, of course, I'll show you guys some other offers that have went out on the football side. Plenty to talk about, roster updates, etc. So a lot of news to run through. I'll get through that as we go throughout. But as I do, as always, be sure to drop your all's questions, comments, concerns, whether it be a WVU basketball news, on WVU football news, or just anything you got in mind in general. Floor is always open on these Q&A streams, right? So I appreciate you guys being here that have tuned in. Like I said, we'll get into the bigger news, the football and basketball editions here momentarily. Want to give some people a chance to roll in here, but we can start it off, though, with the other news I was talking about on the football side, on the more negative side, unfortunately. Let me see if I can pull this article up here. Share this with you guys. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have not. I actually had not seen this one until I got on to set up the stream, and when I do, I usually look up WVU news, football news, WVU basketball news, and seen this one pop up here. And, of course, I always check this site first, WVSportsNow.com, our go-to site here, as we are, of course, a part of the Sports Now network here on the Country Roads webcast with our CRW podcast side of things, of course. But this coming from over there at WVSportsNow.com, if you guys haven't heard, Jalen Shelton, defensive back, leaving West Virginia, entering the transfer portal, came to the Mountaineers as a JUCO recruit, had some high expectations, I think, to kind of hopefully fill in a role there at one of those corner spots, or maybe even play at safety because he had great length. I believe he's 6'4", 6'5", but kind of came in late last season, if I remember correctly, and then never really got in to game action until later in the season. I think he played sparingly, and then in the spring game, you didn't see him get out there till about the third or fourth quarter, and he did bat down a ball. Should have been an interception, really. It was almost right in his hands, but unfortunately, I think he was a little bit further down in the rotation than he would have probably liked to see. So fall in the spring, that's when you're going to see guys hit that portal here once this portal window's open. So hopefully it's not the first of many. Hopefully it's the first of only a few, or maybe the only one West Virginia will suffer. Fingers crossed, right? You never know in today's age of college football, though. But he posted this farewell message on Twitter, kind of announcing his entry into the portal, of course, earlier today. As you can see, this just coming at 2:51 today. So just a few hours ago. Read Jalen Shelton's statement here. You guys follow him on Twitter if you don't already. If you want to, it's at Jalen Shelton 7. He says, first and foremost, I want to thank the man above for blessing me with the opportunity to play college at the highest level. I also want to thank Coach Mike and his coaching staff for developing me at a high level, talking about Mike Joseph. After talking to my family and having time to sit back and think, he'll be entering his name in the transfer portal, 3 years of eligibility remaining. So West Virginia loses a defensive back to the transfer portal. Jalen Shelton, hopefully wish him well, and hopefully he lands on his feet and has a good end to his career there. As he said, there are 3 years of eligibility remaining, looking to come up from the JUCO ranks and hopefully make an impact. But as it stands at WVU, never really got a chance to do that, unfortunately. So I think the West Virginia may have, the coaches talk in the past about seeing some of these moves coming down the line. You can kind of judge it in a little bit, and maybe you can plan ahead for it. And I think because a lot of us were questioning West Virginia have too many scholarships. Why are they offering so many DBs? They've already got a couple DBs in. They've got a commitment from Beanie Bishop. They've got others that are out, and I'll talk more about those offers that have been sent out, as well as some other guys that have kind of committed other places. The one that stands out, of course, Marquise Wilson, the cornerback from Penn State. West Virginia was in on for a long time, unfortunately winding up at Purdue. Some of West Virginia's other offers ending up at other places, but that just means West Virginia sent out offers to other players in the portal, and we'll talk about those momentarily. But I think that's one of the reasons maybe we saw West Virginia kind of send out a lot of offers to defensive backs here lately, is maybe they knew something like this was coming from Jalen Shelton, a defensive back there. And of course, the Mountaineers needed to add extra bodies there anyway. So not saying that's the only reason, but who knows? They could have seen it coming, but wish Jalen Shelton the best. But that's one of the things. Blake Green, what's going on, man? Appreciate you always being in here, tuning in and chiming in. But he says Dylan Ray entered the transfer portal as well. Excuse me, can't talk tonight, but I wasn't aware of that one. Appreciate you update me on that. Let me see if I can pull up anything on that. I hate to hear that. If so, it's really crazy too, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I just saw a post today that it's actually his father, John Ray's birthday, that of course played at WVU back in the 80s, I believe. See if I can see any news on here. Don't see it. I don't see any articles out on it yet anyway that I could share, but I hate to hear that if that is the case, Blake. Like I said, I think that he was one I thought had maybe worked his way into the rotation. So was getting on a because I think he was working with the second team some throughout the spring. I don't know how much he played in the spring game. I need to go back and take a look at that. See if I got it here on my notes, him being in the lineup or not. Because I know I jotted down the first and second team, and no, he wasn't on there, interestingly enough, which is kind of a change, because I know in at least one, maybe two of the spring scrimmages that I covered on the live streams going throughout the spring football practices, that he was one of the second team offensive linemen, and the one that came out with the second team offensive lineman, quote unquote, in the spring was actually Bryce Biggs at left guard. And I think that's where Dylan Ray had been running with that line, was on one of the guard spots. And like I said, I hate to hear that, because I know that he had worked his way up to potentially being on the 2 deep as preferred walk-on, and I thought that maybe he was one of the guys that could potentially earn a scholarship as a walk-on. So unfortunately, it sounds like it may not be the case if he is entering the portal. I hate to hear that, but there are still some preferred walk-ons that I think could earn scholarships for West Virginia, depending on how many they have available. Hudson Clement comes to mind, because you got to think of other receivers that have done that, Preston Fox, Grayson Malashevich, etc. But I'll have to try and factor that in moving forward. Blake Green says he thinks it's on his Twitter. I appreciate you there, Blake. If you got it pulled up, post the link in the chat there. I'll try and pull it up and share it with everyone. But I definitely wanted to touch on the more negative transfer news before we get into the more positive, and also wanted to give some more people a chance to get in here before we touched on the positive transfer news for West Virginia, that being, of course, getting a transfer both on the basketball side and on the football side. But appreciate everybody that's tuning into this live. If you are in here on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that like button, give us a thumbs up. It'll really help this video's performance and future videos performances here on the channel. And if you're a WVU fan, be sure hit that subscribe button. Helps us, and it helps you. It helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And popping in here, of course, we got one of our co-hosts of the CRW podcast here. You guys know him well, I'm sure, of course. Follow him on Twitter there. You see the handle at Big Bubba Brad. CRW there helps us cover recruiting, among other things, here on the CRW, of course. And glad to have you pop in here with us for a few minutes. Brad, what's going on, man? You there, brother? Let me see. Well, technical difficulties on Brad's side, but hopefully going to have Brad join me here in a little bit, and we're going to talk with you guys. And like I said, as we go throughout, drop your questions, comments, concerns, etc. in the chat. Got plenty of news topics to cover along the way as well, and love to hear your all's thoughts on them and engage with you guys, as is the goal here on these Q&A streams. But hopefully Brad will get his stuff there straightened out and be able to hop back on with us. Looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the WVU spring football practices, as well as your all's as well. Steven was going to join too, but he actually, I think, had a little trip out of town today. Purchased him a vehicle, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which shout out to Steven. Congrats. I know he was texting earlier. Don't know if he's tuned in or not, but if he makes it back in time while we're still rolling, he may hop in at some point as well, but hopefully Brad gets it straightened out. But if not, you got me the whole way as usual, but no worries. I'm prepared to carry it if need be, but hey, if I got a lifeline in Brad, that would be awesome too. But anyway, appreciate you guys that are tuned in live. Krista, what's going on? Very excited about the edition of Battle, as am I. And with that, let's touch on that edition of Battle. Got some people in here now. West Virginia doing a great job in the transfer portal on the basketball side. As I've said on previous videos, talking about the additions of both Kerr Kriisa and Jesse Edwards, I think that West Virginia is doing a terrific job in the transfer portal, already having the number one transfer portal class, now bringing in a wing. It's as if they secured all of their needs really at point guard, at center, and now a wing player in Battle that can really help them. Whether he plays the shooting guard or the three, I think that's going to be a toss-up between him and Perez to see who lines up at which spot. But I think you got a potential lethal starting lineup and a great bench as well, with guys like Omar Silverio and Joe Toussaint can provide you bench scoring, and then great backup bigs that we saw last year, show flashes, guys like Mo Wiggy, James Okonkwo, who, of course, if you followed the CRW Hoops podcast, I've affectionately called James Oblakwo. But having said that, let's talk a little bit about the latest addition, Raekwon Battle, coming from Montana State. Don't let the lower division school fool you. This guy is a very talented player, ranked super high in the transfer portal. I believe in the top 25 transfers in the entire portal. Jesse Edwards being a top 5 player in the transfer portal. Kerr Kriisa being a top point guard in the transfer portal. So West Virginia continuing that great run of excellent transfer portal additions, now with the addition of Raekwon Battle. Be sure to drop your all's thoughts there in the chat. I want to hear your all's thoughts on this as well. Let me pull up this article over on WV Sports Now, talking about the addition of Raekwon Battle, who West Virginia beat out a lot of great programs for. We know he was on a visit this past weekend, and it turns out great for the Mountaineers. He's a player that actually was a big recruit out of high school, believe a 4-star recruit, ended up at Washington. So I think he has a connection to both Eric Stevenson and Emmett Matthews. I think I heard Kuz and Paul talk about that on their video when they were talking about the visit of Raekwon Battle, which great stuff over there at Hoops from the Hills. Check that out on YouTube for great WVU basketball content as well. But Raekwon Battle, a guard coming to the Mountaineers with great length, 6'5". Like I said, coming from Montana State, where he was an absolute standout for them last season, averaged 17.8 points per game on 47% from the field. So very high field goal percentage there, almost 50%, 35% from the three and 83% from the free throw line. And additionally, this guy's a super athlete, guys. Think of someone with Eric Stevenson's shooting stroke, but also rare athleticism. This guy's jumping out the gym on dunks. They're throwing him oops. And he's also been, last year was considered, to be the man for Montana State. He showed up in big games for them, put up 27 in the NCAA tournament against a good Kansas State team who we saw make a run in that NCAA tournament. And also, if you go watch his highlights on YouTube, you can find two different clips of him hitting game winners for Montana State, one being an alley-oop dunk, the other being a long-distance three from just over half court that he pulled up and drained. So a guy with a great shooting stroke, but also superior athleticism. To me, it's almost like you took him at Matthews and Eric Stevenson's both best qualities and combined them into one player here, and that's what West Virginia's getting in RaeQuan Battle. Like it says here, the Tulip, Washington native, which, as I said, this article coming from WV Sports Now, written by Ethan Bach, who we all know the great Ethan Bach, covering WVU basketball and the transfer portal like no other. 27 points against Kansas State in the first round of the NCAA tournament. As I said, all Big Sky first team during last year. Played with Eric Stevenson during his time at Washington, has a connection with him at Matthews, also mentioned in this article here by Ethan Bach. So as we said, West Virginia's transfer additions there. Now you see them, and I think you're looking at maybe Silverio coming off the bench. Who knows? Him and Toussaint coming off the bench will be a great bench spark in my mind. The starting lineup I would look to see for West Virginia next year would be something like Kirk Riza at the point, Jose Perez at the 2, RaeQuan Battle at the 3, or vice versa. And then you got Trey Mitchell at the 4 and Jesse Edwards at the 5. And I think that's going to be a lethal starting lineup for the Mountaineers indeed. Let's see here. These are the schools that, this is what I was wanting to pull up here in this article. The schools that Battle picked West Virginia over had a credible list of offers and players that were teams that were interested in him. Once he entered the transfer portal, as you see here, Alabama, Arizona, Cal, Clemson, Louisville, Kansas, Kansas State, LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Texas Tech, UCF, UCLA, Wake Forest, Washington, and of course many others as well, I'm sure. As you see the commitment graphic there he shared in his post, I believe that's on Instagram there, Real RaeQuan Battle, if you want to follow him there. But the Mountaineers adding the one thing that they needed, I think, in the portal now, in a wing. Who knows if they'll still add another piece or two. I think they have at least one scholarship remaining, and depending on what Jimmy Bell chooses to do, they may have multiple. And I've also heard reports, I believe this come from Brad Smith on that same video I was talking about from the Hoops from the Hills guys, was that Silverio's scholarship may be, or scholarship or lack thereof, may just be covered by Country Roads Trust NIL. And that's something some programs are doing to get around scholarship limits. Instead of having, preferred walk-ons that you're not going to use, you give a guy a walk-on spot, but you pay him enough through your NIL collective that it covers essentially his scholarship. So he's not having to pay his own way. He just isn't quote unquote on scholarship, but his tuition is still being paid for. So that's an interesting thing that's come about with the NIL age, and who knows if West Virginia may factor that in now and add another player or two from the portal. But for now, they're adding RaeQuan Battle. So let me pull this up next here. I'm going to pull up our transfer portal tracker here on the Country Roads webcast that I've been doing throughout the offseason, both on the football and basketball side. Let me be sure and pull up the right one, the basketball one rather, for this edition, so that we can add RaeQuan Battle here to the additions coming in for the Mountaineers. And like I said, don't let the Montana State label fool you. Big recruit out of high school, originally went to Washington and rated as one of the top players in the portal. As you see, a top 25 addition in the portal, all those programs after him, comes to the Mountaineers. Like I said, shout out to Jay Kuntz, West Virginia's recruiting director, has been doing awesome things since he was given his keys to the kingdom, if you will, with these transfer portals. And of course, Bob Huggins doing a great job sealing the deal, of course, once they get these recruits on campus from the transfer portal, with his truck being a selling point. I know that's been a funny mention as of late. A lot of these recruits have mentioned that, and it's funny that that's played a part. But West Virginia is really putting together a team to try and make a run with their Hall of Fame coach in Bob Huggins and send him out the right way, send him out on top. We're talking about a squad that's certainly going to be mentioned as a Big 12 competitor and possibly beyond. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but that's the kind of team that it looks like West Virginia is building right now with the pieces that they currently have. So that's definitely the basketball news I wanted to touch on. Then we'll get into more of the football side here. Just let me pull up one final thing here talking about the basketball side, and that is, of course, the transfer portal rankings. I've pulled this up before. This is coming from On3, and I think West Virginia was already listed as the number one transfer portal class by On3. I believe they were 2 or 3 on 247 Sports Now, but now they are number one transfer portal class in the nation on both of those services, On3 and 247 Sports, following the addition of RaeQuan Battle. First, wanted to show you guys his rating, as you can see here, with his transfer rating of a 94. super high rating, and all three of West Virginia's additions have that rating of a 94. If you scroll in here, Kirk Kriisa as well. So all three of the latest additions with a 94 rating, just absolute superstars the Mountaineers have added as of late. And then in addition to that, Jose Perez an 89, no slouch of his own. And then, of course, Omar Silverio that we talked about. I don't see him listed here on this graphic, but another good addition that'll be a scorer for the Mountaineers and will really surprise some people. I think has like sixth man of the year type capabilities, right? But transfer portal rankings here, as I pull this up, you can see West Virginia #1 transfer portal class. And I believe this is not even with the addition of Raekwon Battle factored in yet, if I'm not mistaken, with it only showing 3 transfers in. West Virginia should be at 4 now at least. So I think that's not even with the addition of Raekwon Battle. Yeah, you see 2 4-stars. We now know it's 3 with the Raekwon Battle addition. So West Virginia with the #1 transfer portal class in college basketball. How about that, Mountaineer Nation? Let me catch up on some of your all's thoughts here and comments before I catch up on some of these other news topics I've got here. There's Brad. I see him coming in now. Come on, brother. Glad
yeah, sorry. Okay, can you actually hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now. You sound good. Sound good.
Yeah,
How's it been going, man?
It's been going good, man. StreamYard was not being friendly with my stuff today, so but
I know
it's
how
up and
that
running
goes.
now. So
Yeah, StreamYard can be super frustrating at times. I've had to come out, go back in. It won't like let my camera connect, won't let my mic connect, and I'm like,
this was actually. I guess I'm blaming it on StreamYard. It was actually for some reason my laptop just turned off all the access to my camera, so it was just not. It was anyway.
Yeah, I feel you. StreamYard, I know how it can be. It's great and terrible at the same time sometimes. But having said that, I was just talking about I don't know if you got a chance to catch it. Jalen Shelton into the transfer portal on the football side. Going to talk about the football edition here momentarily. Got a few news topics we'll touch on throughout, and of course take the Q&A along the way. But went ahead and talk a little bit about the addition of Raekwon Battle. Huge addition, another one in the transfer portal for the Mountaineers, top 25 player in the portal for the #1 transfer portal class in the nation. And it really seems like the Mountaineers are building up a class and a team that can make a special run for their Hall of Fame coach, try and send him out on top, I think. But what do you think about Battle and, of course, the transfer portal additions on the basketball side before we kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about football? I got to get your thoughts there, man.
Yeah, and I saw you just had the chart up talking about how we were the #1 class in transfers this year, getting basketball players in. And it really, to me, it feels like Bob Huggins has been unleashed. You know, he's really been able to go out there and throw his full weight of his coaching career at people and be able to tell kids we can pay them for it, you know, and that's pretty big. So, and I think it's definitely showing out. I'm still, I was a little rougher on Bobby Huggins last year, you know, talking about just the team was lacking a few things and it didn't seem as cohesive as what I've seen Bob Huggins teams before, but he's definitely reloading this year to make a lot of people shut their mouths. And, you know, you can't help but hope to see him really make it deep. He's got a super talented roster, but I will say with all these additions, it does raise expectations, and you can't have a team that goes out. You know, they have to go into the tournament as a high seed, and I would say that they would probably have to make it out of the first weekend. I can understand getting a little bit of upset because the tournament's crazy nowadays, but you're getting all your pieces. Your expectations are going to rise. People are going to expect more from you, so we can't have another team that's middling in the middle of the year trying to find their identity and getting yelled at after every game. Can't have that again.
I think that's the one concern is just making sure all the pieces mesh because, you know, that's the only concern in today's game. You can bring in great transfers, but how are they going to perform? But to me, I think looking at it, I think West Virginia is following a similar path to like what a Texas team did last season, right? And you look at Texas last year, they brought in, I think, what was probably the best transfer portal class last season. I know they brought in a ton of guys that were really high up in the portal. And when you look at what they did, it's like the first half of the season, they were kind of finding, like you're talking about, they weren't really meshing. But by the time the tournament rolled around, they were really hitting their stride. So I think you got to hope for West Virginia, if they don't, you know, come out of the gates hot, that they're the type of team that by, you know, midseason and, of course, definitely by the time March rolls around, that they're really hitting on all cylinders. And if they are, with the pieces that you added, who knows what type of team this could be? Because, I mean, this is the question I got to ask because this is the thought that's been running through my head. I mean, even before the addition of Raekwon Battle, just talking about when it was the additions of Kirk Kriisa and Jesse Edwards, and I think I may have even mentioned this in our CRW group chat there on Facebook, but do you think that this is the most talented team Bob Huggins has ever had since he's been at West Virginia basketball?
See, so it's hard for me to say that because I've not been a long time WVU basketball fan. I definitely came in, got hot and heavy in the Javon Carter years. But I know he's had some super talented teams, so it's hard for me to step back and feel like that this is the most talented team that Bob Huggins ever had. But I know a lot of people are speaking super highly about this class. So to me, I think that they're all really talented. But is it his most talented one? I wouldn't say that I'm qualified enough to make that decision.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. It's going to be purely speculative now until the proof's in the pudding when they come out on the court. But, I think on paper, it definitely is an argument that can be made for sure, just because of the level of these guys that West Virginia has brought in is unbelievable. It's just something we haven't really seen at West Virginia. I don't think, we're not used to being ranked the number one transfer portal class, especially in either one of the major sports here. So it's going to be an interesting experiment, I guess you could say, coming up this basketball season. But I definitely can say right now, definitively, in my personal opinion, that this is probably the most excited I've ever been for WVU basketball in April.
Absolutely. I say it is super exciting. I will say that I go to the point of who's going to be the it man, who's going to be the man that just like drives this team as the heart and soul, really focuses around them. Who's going to be the one that we can rely on every, night in and out. I know a lot of people would like that to be Trey Mitchell, but just I didn't see a lot of that last year. And so for me, that's what I'm looking at. Like you said, cohesiveness down the stretch. Who's going to be that man that keeps the team together? And I don't know enough about these players to know who that could be, but it's got to be one of them.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like I said, we'll remain to be seen on that side of things. We got a few months to go for basketball, but we'll switch gears, talk a little bit more about football here momentarily. Let's catch up on some of these questions and comments in the meantime, Brad, and then we'll talk a little bit about the football transfer news, etc. Whatever else we got in here. Let's see where I was at, if I can find my spot here. David Cummings, what's going on, man? Appreciate you as always. He says, just got in here, but a big pickup with the Baylor receiver. If he can stay healthy, he can be a big contributor. Absolutely. That's what we're going to dive into here momentarily. And perfect timing. You guys go ahead. Drop your thoughts, continue in there, whether it be on this Baylor receiver, anything else you got there, WVU basketball, football related, or anything. Of course, as I said, Q&A is always open for whatever, but may as well go ahead and pull up the article there since David gave us such a great segue into the discussion of the transfer wide receiver. West Virginia did add, I believe this came yesterday, Jalen Ellis from Baylor, getting a transfer from an in-conference opponent there, an in-conference foe in the Baylor Bears. And West Virginia, we knew, needed some help on the other spot on the outside. That was one of the things I mentioned in my spring game review, is I think they needed another outside receiver for sure. We knew offers had been sent out. We'll talk more about what offers have been sent out at the wide receiver position. I don't know if West Virginia's done yet. We'll see. We'll talk more about that momentarily. But they do add a guy that can definitely help them on that outside in Jalen Ellis, 6'3", 184-pounder. Like I said, coming from Baylor, appeared in, I think, all of 13 of their games. Yes, he did, as it says here in the article on WV Sports Now. But he was more used only exclusively as a deep threat. But that's what impresses me most about this player is his speed. I think West Virginia has made a concerted effort to add some speed to that wide receiver room. We've talked in the past about the position move of Davis Mallinger from defense to offense to try and help that. And now adding Jalen Ellis, he's going to be up there in debate for one of the fastest players on the team, I think. And that's what he showcased at Baylor when he was targeted, was great speed. He had multiple catches of 50-plus yards, as you see here, with his numbers, 5 catches, 5 passes caught, 141 yards and a touchdown. But he's also a very talented player, an Army All-American out of high school, picked the Mountaineers over Auburn, Utah, Texas A&M. Once he visited Morgantown, kind of just made his decision then, didn't go anywhere else, and decided on the Mountaineers. And I think he'll be a contributor in the fall. And he mentioned, I think he did an interview with 247 Sports that he's not going to be only a go ball receiver. I think West Virginia is going to really try and get him involved in other ways and use his speed and just try and get him open field, screens, slants, RPOs, etc. So I think it's going to be a good addition, and West Virginia really needs some competition on the other outside receiver spot. Like I said, Devin Carter has one lockdown. Cortez Braham looked good on the other side, but adding competition there is only going to help. And of course, you definitely need depth. So I like this pickup for the Mountaineers in Jalen Ellis and in conference receiver addition. Brad, what are you thinking here about this addition for the Mountaineers trying to help the offense?
Yeah, I think it's big, literally. A 6'3" kid that's got some speed to him. That's really exciting. I think it'll really match up well with Carter on the other side, because he's a big body. He seems to go up there and has a lot of strength behind it. Have a little quick guy on the outside edge to help with speed would probably be really nice. Yeah, definitely somebody that's going to be filling in that wide receiver room. I think that that's still a big question mark. So is he going to come out and get the starting spot over Cortez Braham? I don't know. Cortez Braham looked really, really good spring game. I thought he was, a bright spot. But, hey, let him come in and compete for it. May the best man win, because we need a team that can win this year.
Yeah, just because at this point, where he has the experience edge, I'd be surprised if, game one, Cortez Braham's not the starter on the X receiver or Z, whichever one it is. I can't remember who's on which side, but if he's not the starter there game one, but it could be a situation where then they're splitting time by midseason or someone, if you get, Ellis in here and he develops in the right way. And I definitely think they'll find ways to get him on the field regardless. West Virginia needed some bodies in that room, as we know, losing all 4 wide receivers they had last season. Catch up on some of your all's comments. Then I want to talk a little bit more about the transfer portal and talk about some of the offers that West Virginia sent out. Brad, we'll touch on that here momentarily. Blake Green says, if you listen to the recent podcast with the Baylor transfer, he spoke of beating the quarterback and seeing what he was about. Then he said it was Garrett. Yeah, I did catch that as well. I thought that was a nice little hint there. That's the 247 sports guys. I think it was Mike Kazaza, Chris Anderson, one of the two that did the brief little conversation with Jalen Ellis after he committed to the Mountaineers, which his commitment was kind of a surprise. He's one of those that we've seen West Virginia do in the past. They kind of just sneak in on a visit. You don't even know that they've offered him or targeted him, and they sneak him in on a visit and get a commitment. I think they've done that a couple times recently. I think Day Hawkins went that way as well earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, getting Ellis was a great pickup, and that podcast was telling maybe, because I think he did seem like Garrett Green was the one that hosted him on his visit as well. So I think that's maybe why he was really only referencing Garrett. But I think just with the timing of that, of course, with us just watching the spring game and him standing out the way that he did, it's very interesting. But I'm certainly done a complete 360 to where I was at the beginning of spring practice to where I am now as far as the starting quarterback battle is concerned. But any thoughts there, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like a little sneaky. I think that if we're going to get on the topics of the quarterbacks, Garrett Green looked like a man that has played some football out there in the spring game, which I thought was really telling. Yeah. Whereas, when I saw Nico go out there, it still seemed like a guy that was uncomfortable. Still seemed like a little young, a little green around the gills. Where, man, Garrett Green stepped in there. He didn't look like the same player that I've seen for the last couple of years. He definitely had an air of confidence. He knew that it was kind of, to me, it felt like he saw it as his job to lose, and he went out there and played with that confidence, and looked really, really good doing it. So, I'm sure a lot of kids would be really excited about him because he had some really good, well-timed balls out there to Devin Carter. And just it looks spot on. So I'm sure a lot of wide receivers would be excited to play with him and get a chance to catch some of his balls.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, I've done a complete 360 because heading into the spring, I thought that it was Nico Marchiol's job to lose. And then as we got later in spring camp, you started hearing reports about Garrett Green really standing out in some of the scrimmages. And I'm looking up some of the stats here so I can kind of read them off because I know Garrett Green stood out kind of the most indeed, but just numbers wise, even on the stat sheet as well, 8 of 11 for 156 and a touchdown for Garrett Green. So 73% completion rate, 221.9 quarterback rating. I mean, I think even to the naked eye, he stood out, but then when you look at the numbers, it's the same way. Nico, 6 of 12, 58 yards and 50% completion rating. And I personally didn't think Nico looked bad, but I was, surprised that he didn't look more progressed than last season, really. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't progress at all, but I thought he would have progressed a lot further, I guess is what I'm trying to say in regards to Nico. And I don't think Nico's bad, but I think just maybe we have high expectations for him, and we got to remember that he's still young. Garrett Green's been around a long time. So I think at this point, I mean, it's maybe safe to say, is this Garrett Green's job to lose? And if it is, what does that mean for the future of Nico Marchiol? Are you worried about losing a guy like Nico?
I mean, again, you go back and you asked me at the beginning of the spring how I felt about it. I might give you a different answer. And I just take a step back because I meant to bring it up. But, I was also kind of thinking that Nico had a jump on the job too, from the way Neil Brown was talking about it a little while ago. He was talking about a few weeks ago, and he was talking about how, Garrett Green was making some poor decisions on third down and seemed to be less consistent, and that Nico was making less flashy plays, but was being more consistent. And so at that point in time, I thought he was really giving a nod to Nico personally. And so I didn't expect it to be as significant of a difference as it was in the spring game, which is just a spring game, man. It could have just been nerves. It could be anything,
Right.
But since then, though, I don't Where I differ from in the spring, though, is that I don't feel like Nico's as big of a flight risk as what I once kind of assumed, because he is incredibly talented, and he could probably go have a shot at playing anywhere he wanted to. But the amount of camaraderie and teamwork that I've seen between him and Garrett Green is just something that I feel like you don't see in a quarterback room all that often. Like, they seem like true friends, like two guys that really like being around each other, competing with each other, playing for each other. So maybe Nico just really loves Neil Brown and he's happy. Maybe he can see, that he's not quite ready yet. And he's very happy with somebody, if Garrett Green is our starter, has a quality year. I don't know if he's going to the NFL because he's, smaller size, not your typical NFL quarterback. Probably going to want to stick around for another year. But Garrett Green is, just another image of Nico Markiel. So if GG's incredibly productive in the system, why wouldn't Nico? Maybe he wants to stay for that. Maybe he doesn't. But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's hard to judge anymore because sometimes you feel like a guy's 100% bought in and he completely surprises you. But what I'll say is Nico's given me no indications of not being loyal to West Virginia to this point, and I definitely think the fact of him and Garrett Green being good friends helps a lot. And also, they're the only two scholarship quarterbacks on that. Well, I mean, you got the true freshman Sean Boyle, but the only two quarterbacks that are on scholarship with any experience at this level on the roster. So regardless of how it ends up, either one of them's only one snap away from potentially having to play. So I think no matter what, I would be surprised if either one of them left during this season. If anything, you may have to worry about after the season, depending on how things play out. But I think you got both of them should be solidly locked in my opinion, just for people that are kind of worried about that. But also, Garrett Green definitely looks like the favorite, and that's kind of the things that we've heard now here late in the spring. But also, the one thing I've been mentioning, Brad, and I'm going to scroll through some of these spring game stats as I kind of vamp here a little bit, but that last year's spring game, do you remember who was the best quarterback that stood out then?
Goose Crowder.
Goose, exactly.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So it's like it's hard to take a lot of the way from the spring game because, I mean, you can look at that from last year with Goose was the main standout, and then, of course, he was the one that really didn't get any playing time in the fall. And then, of course, you had other guys in the past that have been spring game superstars and then haven't produced in the fall as well. So that's one thing you can look at if you're still got hopes for Nico Markiel, which I think a lot of us do. I think he's a fan favorite. And, of course, being as high as a recruit as he was, we want to see him contribute. But also, like you said, just because he may not end up winning the job this season doesn't mean he won't have a good future for the Mountaineers. You never know what this year could hold down the line. And then, of course, like you said, he'll still be around following the graduation of Garrett Green if he decides to stick with the Mountaineers. So I think it's a battle that's going to go into the fall, and we'll see what happens. But I definitely thought that comment was interesting on that podcast there, Blake. Chris asked, do you think we'll add any more to the basketball, or are we done? I believe they have one scholarship left right now, and that's not including what Jimmy Bell potentially may do, which, if you're asking me, I think he's going to play football personally. I think he's going to stick with it. But I think they have at least one scholarship left. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him bring in at least one more transfer, maybe two, but I think they'll add at least one more transfer. Brad, what do you think?
I have no idea. I'm just watching in amazement at this point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's crazy. And especially like the way that, because even last year it was like to the point where we don't have any scholarship left and we're still bringing in transfers. So just the way they kind of finagle the roster around to make things work scholarship wise and stuff's always interesting as well. But I don't think that they're necessarily done yet, Krista. I wouldn't be surprised to see them still reach out. I know there was a report last week that they reached out to that 7'4" center from Florida State, maybe, I can't remember. So I think they're still potentially reaching out to guys, and you also can't discount the fact that you may still lose some pieces as well. Hopefully not. Hopefully you've lost everyone you're going to lose, but you never know moving forward. David Cummings says Huggins has done an amazing job. If they can gel early on, have a real shot of a good run next season. I agree. Krista says, heard a rumor on Twitter, the basketball team may go over to Italy this summer and play. Ooh, that'd be nice. I know is that where they went a few years ago, Brad? They went somewhere.
Yeah. I think
it was Italy. Yeah, I think that turned out pretty good for him. So it's always good bonding. You got to build up that chemistry, especially with a lot of new pieces. I wouldn't be surprised to see him do something like that to try and get everyone involved. What's going on, BJ? Good to see you, man, as always. He says, get excited about basketball. We should be pretty good next season. Definitely should. Blake Green says Dylan Ray retweeted Jackson Oxley's tweet about entering the portal, so I think he's still with the team. I'm gonna wipe my brow on that one because I like Dylan Ray a lot, and of course, being a legacy player, you'd hate to see him leave. And like I said, I literally saw earlier that it's his dad, John Ray's birthday, so I'm like, man, he's entering the portal on his dad's birthday, and as a legacy player. So glad to hear that he's not. And like I said, I think he could be involved with a potential scholarship in the future. He worked his way up to almost a 2 deep, and definitely could contribute on that line in the future. So good to hear that. But I appreciate you guys tuning in, chiming in. Continue to drop your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns there as we go along. I want to touch a little bit here on the football transfer offers that we've got out, Brad, and of course add Jalen Ellis to the transfers in list here as well. Let me pull this up. Of course, we've been trying to keep track of this throughout the offseason. Add Jalen Ellis to the transfers in list here from the in-conference foe there in Baylor. Gotta like West Virginia getting one from one of the conference opponents there, and hopefully shows out when the Mountaineers play the Bears. So that's the latest transfer in addition. And of course, unfortunately, now add another transfer out. The first one of the spring, really. Hopefully not too many more following if we're lucky. But Jalen Shelton, of course, as we mentioned earlier in the stream, leaving the Mountaineers, but Jalen Ellis adding the Mountaineers. The Mountaineers losing a Jalen, adding a Jalen, interestingly enough. But looking at the potential transfer targets, and this is what I was kind of talking about earlier with the wide receiver position in West Virginia may not be done. Adding to that, they still have offers out. We've talked about Jaquay Jackson in the past. My personal gut feeling, though, with West Virginia adding Ellis and then sending out another offer, maybe they're feeling like Jackson may be leaning another way. I'm hoping not. His fingers still crossed on that. But they did send out an offer to Montana Lemonius Craig, who just entered the transfer portal from Colorado following their spring game, and is really a ton of teams after him right now. I believe he had something like 3 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown in their spring game, and then entered the portal after. So been a very hot commodity in the portal. West Virginia is one of the teams that sent him on offer. The other ones here we've kind of talked about. Cameron Johnson, I haven't removed yet because he hasn't committed somewhere else, but I did hear that he was maybe down to 2 schools, and unfortunately, neither one of them was West Virginia. I believe it was like USC and Nebraska or something like that. So I don't know if West Virginia's out of the running yet, but that's a rumor that I've seen going around. Did remove some other players. I think Keith Brown actually committed elsewhere, so I can go ahead and take him off as well. Some other players on the D-line committed elsewhere. The big ones that West Virginia had out to, the big D lineman from Auburn and Oregon, committed elsewhere. I mentioned Marquise Wilson going to Purdue, but West Virginia sent out a few other offers since the last update. I think KV Rose from Louisiana Tech's new one, and Isaac Ukwu from James Madison. Other than that, we've already had Amari McNeil and Anthony Campbell. Both those offers out. Already talked about Brendan Gant on our last transfer update. Talked about Anthony Wilson, and I believe talked about Antonio Carter in the past as well. 2 DBs West Virginia is after. I believe Wilson would be more of a safety for the Mountaineers. And then targeting more in-conference players, Jaden Davis, a defensive back from Oklahoma, and Noah Daniels, a defensive back from TCU, Miles Rouser, a defensive back from Campbell. I'm trying to pull up a little bit of information. I've got another some here in my notes. Kevy Rose, the defensive lineman, 2 years left to play 2 seasons. The wide receiver from Colorado would have 3 years left to play 2 seasons. The defensive lineman from Tennessee, 3 years left of eligibility. The defensive lineman, Isaac Ukwu there from James Madison, 1 season left of eligibility. Noah Daniels, 1 year left of eligibility, as well as Jaden Davis, 1 year left of eligibility. 2 years left to play for Brandon Gant at linebacker, 2 years left to play for Antonio Carter at defensive back, and then 1 year left to play for Anthony Campbell, the 6'7" defensive lineman there. West Virginia still after. So a little bit of an update there on the transfer portal there with our transfer portal tracker here on the Country Roads webcast. Before we catch up with any comments here, Brad, your thoughts on any of the transfers West Virginia's targeting or anyone they've added thus far as they're trying to build this roster, getting set to head into fall now, transfer portal window closing here in a few days. So who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully not too many more defects from the team, but any thoughts there on transfers in general, I guess, as far as Mountaineer football is concerned?
Yeah, my only real thought is that I thought we would go after linebackers a bit more. I just feel like that's like one of our weakest spots. I feel like we've done a good job bolstering the DBs. We've got some good wide receivers in, which if you remember, I wasn't even very big on bringing in more than one wide receiver. I thought that, I thought we had the talent in the room. We just had to figure out who was going to be the guy. I thought we needed one big piece, and I think DC is it. But yeah, I just thought, I feel like our will linebacker is a little bit weak spot, and I don't really know who's going to fill that after X-Ray Low being gone now. He's probably in a retirement home, if I had to guess, because he was here for so long. So I just maybe it's a tough spot. Maybe it's just hard to find somebody to step in that situation, and they would rather go with the young guys we got. But just interesting, I think.
I'm right there with you because I think I've mentioned that in the past as well, that as far as positions that I'm concerned about in the defense, I mean, you can point out several. Of course, we got to improve the secondary and stuff, but we've added pieces. They are still targeting more pieces. I think will linebacker is the spot I'm looking at as well, just because you don't have anybody that's really got too much experience there. Trey Lathan's probably your favorite to start there, and we know a ton of potential. He's a recruit that me and you have both loved in the past, and so I like that there, but I don't know about the depth behind. I think Jaffa Veras, post-spring game, I feel a little bit better about him. I think that he's going to actually maybe have a competition there with Lathan and maybe even start. He's been a special teams contributor, and it looks like he's definitely put on the size there. I know he came in as a corner, but he definitely had the frame there in the spring game, it looked like, and looked super fast on the field. So I do like both of those guys, but I'm with you. I was really hoping West Virginia to add another body to that linebacker room, both to compete at will and then also maybe play a reserve role at the Mike linebacker position now that we've lost Josiah Trotter with that season-ending injury. I think spelling Lee Koba is something we need to do more this season. Love Austin Cave there. Hopefully he's the guy to do it, but I wouldn't mind having another body there in addition, because behind there you only got Caden Beiser, who's no slouch of his own, but you'd rather have a scholarship guy there if you can get one out of the portal maybe, and you could have a guy you could cross-train both positions, Mike and Will. But we'll see what happens. I'm right there with you, though. Catching up on some of these comments, though, after getting a little transfer update here. Blake Green says, reminds me of George Campbell, a big recruit who really didn't pan out at his first stop, but I think we can utilize. Yeah, I had George Campbell vibes when I first started learning about Jalen Ellis and hearing about the commitment. Like I said, kind of came out of nowhere to me. I actually think the first I heard about it was Silas, which shout out to our subscriber, Silas. I don't know if you're in here today, but always loyal to tune in usually, but he was mentioned it as a comment on one of the other videos that he was waiting for the video on the Baylor transfer wide receiver commit. And I was like, what? And I hopped on Twitter, and that's when I first started seeing the news breaking about it and started researching him a little bit. But yeah, an absolute burner, man. I think it's going to be great addition for the Mountaineers. They needed to add speed there to the offense, so hopefully that really helps there. Joey Boggs, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here. He said Garrett Green going to be QB1. It's looking that way, in my opinion, right now as well, I think so, too. Great Joey Boggs in the stream. Love to see it. Forrest Poston says, Dylan Ray not currently listed on the roster, though. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something to that then. I think Blake said that, he thought that it was a tweet from Ray entering the portal, but he was retweeting someone else. But interesting, he's not on the roster anymore. I know he was on there earlier in the offseason, so man, I don't know if he's in or if he's out, but I hope he's on the team. Hope he's sticking around. Like I said, I think he's got decent potential for the future for the Mountaineers to be a contributor on the O-line. And, of course, you love those legacy players, so we'll see. But nice find for us. Appreciate you pointing that out. BJ says Green played very well, but I didn't think the O-line played nearly as well when Nico was in. Yeah, Neil Brown mentioned that as well, I think. What are your thoughts on that? Nico originally, when they first came out, Garrett Green was the first one they trotted out there with the first team, which – maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's not. But then, of course, they did a good job, I think, of letting both groups play with the first team offensive line. But it seemed like the pass blocking wasn't as good for Nico, and even Neil Brown mentioned that. Do you think that plays into a part of maybe him being left-handed and things being flipped a little bit, and you got Nestor protecting his blind side versus Milam? Maybe it's a little bit different for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a little bit of a factor to it, but I think that also some of it just comes down to pocket presence, and I think that I guess with the line in the scrimmage, it'd been easier just to run away, but you can't really do that much of a scrimmage because they were getting blown down so early. So I don't know, probably a little bit of both of those two things, a little bit left-handed, a little bit of not having a chance to really use his feet, and I don't think it's like the line was just like significantly worse because he's left-handed, but maybe just enough to be noticeable.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't ever much of a football player myself, so I don't know how much that would affect it one way or the other. But it's got to make some difference, you would think. I don't know, but I don't know if that played into a part to the offensive line, maybe not playing as good or not. But just something that came to my mind when Neil Brown brought that up. But I think that's definitely interesting. But to me, it also made it look like to the naked eye, and that's one of the things I mentioned in my post game of the spring game was that everything just seemed to run smoother when Green was in there. And, that's chicken or the egg situation, I guess, right? When you're talking about the offensive line struggling. But to me, it just seemed like everything flowed better when Green was in there. That's the way I kind of felt about it.
Well, and his balls were also a lot more on point. I mean, Nico, the CJ, is it CJ Cole?
CJ Cole, yeah.
Yeah. His catch, I mean, that ball was a little bit out of reach. It was definitely his athleticism, and that was Nico throwing that ball. And you have Garrett Green dumping him over the shoulder in the pocket to DC. I think that there was a notable difference just in their passing and just who was able to hit their guys better.
Well, to me, it was kind of reversed too. I was expecting Nico to be out there throwing the darts and maybe Garrett Green, because we've seen in the past Garrett Green struggle with his reads at time and then sometimes miss a throw here or there. But Green's reads were on point, and he was the one out there throwing darts. And like you said, Nico had a couple misfires out there. Like I said, it could be a timing issue. He's still young, getting used to the game. But I definitely thought it was interesting how it played out, kind of the opposite of how I thought it was going to play out early in the spring. Like I said, completely turned around now. And Garrett Green, I was just super impressed by. It wasn't that, like I said, it wasn't that Nico looked bad to me, more so as Garrett Green looking the best I've ever seen him look.
Yeah, I think it's along those lines of, we've seen Garrett Green struggle for a couple of years now of changing those things, working on his reads, not using his feet as much, putting balls where they need to be, timing it up right. It's just things we've seen him struggle with for a couple of years now, and you don't necessarily believe he's going to get it right this time. Nothing against Garrett Green, but you just haven't seen it yet. Why see it now? And Nico Markell, you've not had a chance to see do that progression, so you just assume the progression is there. And when it comes out, Garrett Green has actually worked on, gotten better at, and improved it his whole entire game. I think that it was noticeable, man. I think that you could really tell that he was not the same man, same guy standing back there.
Yep, it really was. It really was. I 100% agree with you. Cliffhanger, appreciate you coming in, man. Appreciate you tuning in, chiming in. Said it's going to be cool getting to see the run game back in Morgantown. That running back room is sick. Pretty cool. We haven't lost anyone since the spring game. And I don't have any wood around, so I'm just going to pretend this is wood and I'm going to knock on it, Cliffhanger, because so far we haven't, but deep room, so I'm hoping that it stays that way. But
yeah,
I think they're going to play multiple running backs, try and get them on the field. And
give me your 1 to 4 though. I think it goes CJ Donaldson. Give me your 2, 3, 4 after that.
I think I'm going CJ and Jalen. I think are the top two right now. I think it's CJ and Jalen, and then it's a toss up behind there. Tony and Justin obviously are probably your favorites, but man, I just got a feeling Jaheim White's going to find a role on this offense in some way. He's too explosive and too much. He's too different than any of the other running backs that we have for them not to find a way to get him involved somehow as well. So I don't know if he's in that top 4 yet, but he's just got something that I don't think we've had in a while.
Yeah, I think I'm right there. CJ, I'm probably going Justin Johnson second, and I'm going Jalen Anderson third. I just have not been that impressed with Tony Mathis. He came in with a lot of expectations last year, kind of got overshadowed by CJ Donaldson, but a little fumble prone. And I feel like I still saw him miss some gaps, man. He was running into tackles and not getting, hitting holes the way he should. I think that, Jaheim White's up there battling for that spot.
It's possible.
Being quite honest.
It's possible. I think, to me, CJ's obviously got the high ceiling. He's going to maybe be the superstar. I think he's got that type of potential to be one of the best running backs in the conference. But I love Jalen Anderson's vision. And I think I even heard CJ Donaldson mention in an interview that that's one thing he tries to learn from Jalen about is he thinks he has the best vision in the room. And when I've heard, Neil Brown and I think Chad Scott both talk about the offense and talk about using multiple backs, one way, of course, they're going to do that is CJ Donaldson, of course, we know was a high school wide receiver, so they can split him out wide and then have another running back in the backfield or potentially 2 other running backs in the backfield. But I also think Jalen Anderson can do that because if you go watch his high school film, he was used a lot in their passing game, and they talked about him having nice hands. So I think potentially you could have CJ and Jalen kind of as your top 2, like maybe that get to see the field the most, just because either one of those or both potentially at times can split out, and then you can bring in any one of the other 3 we just mentioned, Jaheim White, Tony Mathis, and Justin Johnson. And let's not forget DJ Oliver going to be coming in over the summer as well. Who knows if he's, coming in over the summer is a little bit late for him to contribute this year maybe, but he's a big running back as well. That's no slouch too. So very talented backfield, definitely, Cliffhanger. It's going to be nice to see a more run-heavy offense, I think. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they manage those bodies. But the one thing I'll say is I didn't think the run game was as dominant in the spring game as I expected it to be. It had its moments, and I think you can definitely see it there, but I think maybe that's contributing to, not having Zach Frazier there and stuff as well. But that's one of the things that stuck out to me. That was the main standout. Garrett Green surprising me, and then the run game not being as dominant as I expected it to be. But I think in turn with that, the passing game was better than I expected it to be as well. So I guess a little bit of positive and negative there.
Absolutely.
David Cummings says we're going to have to use both quarterbacks to be successful. Interesting. I haven't considered the fact of doing that if Garrett Green is the starter, because to me, I considered that when I thought Nico was going to be the guy. I figured you'd still find ways to get Garrett Green involved. But if Garrett Green's your starter, do you think they find ways to get Nico on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you'll see a little bit of both of them. I don't think that it's going to be – I would say it's probably going to be less significant than getting Garrett Green in last year with JT Daniels, honestly. Sorry for a little crack of the voice there. I think that they're just going to go with, if it's Garrett Green and he looks as good as he does, I think that they're just going to let him, every now and then they might throw in Nico just to confuse him. We need a crazy play against Pitt to just get the game up and going maybe, but I wouldn't say it's something you would see every game.
I agree. I think so too, because to me, the one thing that you would, want to bring Nico in is like, if I'm playing two quarterbacks, it's because one of them gives me something the other one doesn't, right? And Garrett can run and pass. Not that Nico can't run, but Nico's just more of a power runner. He can get you a few yards if you need it. He's not going to break that explosive long run. Yeah, so if Nico's if Nico's my starter, then that can justify. I can justify playing Garrett Green. But if Garrett Green's my starter, I don't know if there's really anything I'm going to need Nico for. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
other than just like the pure like shock and awe factor, like, hey, I've got Garrett Green, I've got Nico catching the snap, and Garrett Green standing beside him. What do I do? You don't know, because you're going to swing it out to Garrett Green, let him chuck it 65 yards down the field, or you're going to RPO and let Nico dump it off. You'll let Nico, like, there's such scary things, but that's just like a one-off thing. Like, they're not going to run their system around that. It's going to be hey, we need a exciting play right now against Penn State. We're in the third quarter. We need some energy. Throw them both in there and let's see if we can get us a sneaky one.
Yeah, that's true. I could see it playing out that way. I wasn't considering that way more. I was more thinking of like a 2-quarterback system, but yeah, I definitely could see it, like, especially you're trying to break something out, catch, like you said, Penn State off guard. That's one way to do it. Have Garrett Green, Nico, and a running back all in the backfield together, with it being CJ Donaldson.
Preston Fox, they've already seen that guy can throw a touchdown. So like,
exactly. It's on tape.
They won't know what to do.
Well, and that's one good thing. If anything, putting that one trick play on tape definitely shows Penn State that they're going to have to be prepared for some things, I think, because they're like, oh, they're willing to show this in their spring game. Who knows what they're going to cook up for the real thing coming in to try and knock us off. So it's going to be, hopefully have them on their toes at least, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure. But like, that's the only way that I see us getting both of them in the game at the same time, is just pure shock and awe factor, catch a team on their heels and try to get a sneaky tutty.
Yep. Forrest with a great point here. Appreciate you, Forrest, as always. He says, keep in mind that it's not fair to judge Green and Marchiol based on one game, but Green has definitely matured even since the Oklahoma State game. Right, and that's the one thing I've been trying to say as well, is like, it's not even just the fact that his performance in the spring game was great, because, as I mentioned earlier, like last year, Goose was a standout in the spring game. We've seen other spring game standouts not do things in the fall. To me, it was just more, I guess, surprising of how much Garrett Green has improved since the end of last season. Like you're saying there, Forrest, it just was very apparent, especially in his passing game, the way that he was reading the field, everything. It was just, his throws were coming out on time. It just looked night and day difference, really, I thought.
Yeah, and I think that it's even more of not Garrett Green versus Nico Marchiol. We're not downing Nico Marchiol because he played fine. I think that just the difference between what we're comparing to is Garrett Green now to Garrett Green in December of last year, and visibly that looks like two different people on that field, and in a really good way.
Yep.
Like, it's just like I said, it's not that Garrett Green looked more impressive than Nico Marchiol. It's that Garrett Green looked significantly better than he looked last year, and he did just fine last year. Like I said, he just seemed more confident. He seemed like a guy that's been in a system for a long time. He felt like it was his team. Like, he walked out there and he was throwing the ball that way, and I've screamed it from the high heavens for years now. We need somebody with an it factor. And to me, he just had it. He was just in there, and he was like, I know what I'm in here to do today. And he knew his job, he knew his duties, and he got it done. And that's what impressed me. It has nothing to do with the rest of it.
Right.
It has nothing to do with how Nico Marchiol played or the battle they got going on. To me, it was, damn, Garrett Green looks like a man. And I watched him come up from being a boy.
Yep. Literally, it just looked, like you said, like night and day difference. And he was just seemed like he was in complete control of the offense. And like you said, like the it factor comment, I think sums it up well. Because to me, just being there watching in the stands, it was like, the way I described it was like an intangible feeling that was just noticeable to me within the first, 3-4 drives of the game. Once I got to look a decent look at both quarterbacks, that it just felt completely different when Garrett Green was on the field. And there's really no way to describe it other than just, watching it and feeling it. And it just felt more cohesive, I guess would be the best word, when Green was on the field.
And I would even say that like his body changed. Like he just looks older. He just looks like his body's more prepared. That is like, he looks like he belongs on that field. Where, like I said before this, I've just felt like he was a bit small, a bit high schoolish, a bit young. Even looking at him out there, he looked a little bit young to be out there. But now I feel that same feeling towards Nico Marchiol right now, is that he still just looks young out there.
Right.
And Garrett Green didn't look young out there.
Right. And that goes right here with Blake's comment. He said he thinks Nico held onto the ball too long. Even Rasheed Marshall mentioned it multiple times during the broadcast. And I think that plays right into, with the youth, because to me, if he's holding onto the ball too long, that probably just means that he's thinking too much out there than, being out there playing. And it's probably just going to come with more experience for Nico, for him to get more in that groove and get into that rhythm, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Forrest says neither Oxley nor Ray is on the roster at WVU Sports. Surprising they would update so quickly. Searches still bring up nothing except Ray's tweets of Oxley. Ray got a good review after the game. Yeah, that's what's so surprising to me. I'm hoping that maybe they're just updating the roster. Maybe it's, an anomaly and he's still going to be on there. They accidentally took him off or something. Who knows? But it's not a good sign if he's not on the roster. But it's very weird to me, the timing, just because the fact that he moved up close to the 2 deep for the first time and had been getting praise throughout, the spring and stuff. So I don't know. Interesting. We'll see how that plays out.
For sure.
Blake says, do you think if Neil could go back in time, he would started Garrett Green in 2021, knowing that he would still have his job in 2023? What do you think, Brad? That's tough. Hindsight's 2020 always is for sure playing a factor there, but
no, just because Neil Brown doesn't have a good tendency to change.
Well, here's the thing, man. Like Garrett Green we're watching now in 2021, Garrett Green are two different things. Like if you're putting 2020, this year's Garrett Green in that situation, then of course, but was he ready then is the question we'll never really know the answer to, because we never really got to see the extensive playing time. We just saw him play situationally. So, we'll never have our judgment on that. We're just going to have to trust what their judgment was, which was that he wasn't. So I don't know.
Yeah. Because Neil always preach, don't put a guy in there before he's ready, because it'll do more damage than. But you're really testing out your theory, Neil Brown. You didn't really put him in until the end of last year, and he better be ready this year.
Yeah, let's hope so, man. We need it. We need him to be. Let's see. Blake says Jaheim reminded him of Deuce Vaughn. Interesting comparison. I like it. I think same number too, 22. I like that. I'm sticking with my Steve Slayton comparison since Jed Drenning broke that out back on signing day. I don't know. I'm a big fan. I don't know if he's going to ascend up the depth chart as quickly as Slayton did, but I think he's got a bright future.
Absolutely.
Cliffhanger says Jalen's going to be a badass, talking about the wide receiver coming from Baylor. Hey, hope so. Getting that speedster is only going to help. We need some explosiveness on this offense. Louis Burgos, I hope the safety from Georgia Southern commits to us today. Appreciate that, man. As always, would love to see it. I know that's Anthony Wilson that he's talking about there. Like I said, we need that help at the safety spot, need that depth, and he would be an excellent pickup. A lot of programs after him, so would be great. I would love to see it pop up that he commits to us. We'll see what happens. I know that he went on his visit to Louisville and didn't commit, so he's coming this way soon, right? So we got to like our chances, I think, right now. Once West Virginia gets one of the last visits, that's usually a good sign.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Anthony Wilson, Brad?
I still don't think we need the DBs. I think we need the linebackers, but hey, at this point. Just throw them all back there, and somebody's got to be better than.
Well, that's what I literally think. I honestly think that they're really trying to take out some insurance policies after how they got burnt last year on just their couple pieces, and also being spooked by the early injury to Charles Woods, and that something like that happening again. I think they're trying to load up as much as they can.
Yeah, like you want to see somewhere that's going to have a lot of transfers again in a couple of years. It's probably going to be that spot.
Yeah,
it's just like we're filling it up and just saying, "Hey, may the odds be ever in your favor. Best man win." I'm
hoping Spells comes out. I'm hoping Spells comes out on top of one of those two spots.
But talk about the spring game.
Yeah,
Miller looked really good. What's his name?
Montre Miller. Yeah,
Montre Miller looked really good. So he has some good locked up plays.
Well, it was funny because him and Cortez Braham, they were battling each other throughout the spring game. I know Miller had a couple pass breakups. Braham had that one touchdown on the RPO play on Miller. But I didn't find out till today. I was watching the Climbing the Mountain podcast Country Roads Trust does, which I'm sure you guys check that out if you haven't already. They released another one today, their final one of the spring, I believe. But they were both on there, Montre Miller and Cortez Braham. And I didn't even know they played against each other or with each other in high school. They've known each other. Cortez Braham was actually talking about Montre Miller played wide receiver back then, and he taught Cortez a lot. So they're actually like friends and stuff. So it was funny to me to find that out after the fact, after I'd already seen them battling. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
But yeah, I liked Miller a lot. I think I was surprised. And like I said, I don't know how much you can take away of who comes out there first with the quote unquote first team in the spring, right? But that's one thing on defense that stood out to me that I talked about was the first two out at corner. Because I was expecting Montre Miller and Spells were kind of my two favorites. But the first two corners out were actually Andrew Wilson-Lamp and Malachi Ruffin. And then Montre Miller and Spells were out behind them. So I thought that was I don't know if that was telling or not, but it was interesting to me for sure and surprising in my eyes. But hopefully that means Wilson-Lamp's really progressing and Malachi Ruffin's picking up where he left off last season.
Yeah, I'll say it's going to be, yeah. Like I said, it's definitely saturated back there right now.
That's what I say. It's a toss up of who you're going to see back there. I just hope whoever it is really produces because we need it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dwayne Mattern says, hope Hugs gets to play sooner rather than later. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. Just getting this team to mesh, getting the chemistry right is going to be the issue with the new pieces. But if anyone can do it, it's got to be the Hall of Famer, right? What else we got? Forrest says Green is evidence that Brown/staff can develop players who are willing to work, and Green has understood the issues all along and worked. Sometimes you finally reach a point where things click. Love that takeaway right there. Love that takeaway. Yeah, that would be a testament to that because we've seen guys that have sat behind others not be willing to sit and learn, do what they're supposed to do to climb up the depth chart, instead hit the portal, which is just kind of the way it goes in today's game. So. To me, that's one thing I definitely have a lot of respect for Garrett Green about is that he stuck around and waited his turn, and seeing him surprise me the way he did in the spring game, I'm really in his corner now because I think he's got that kind of mentality almost that like one of my favorites of all time, Skylar Howard had, just that kind of chip on the shoulder mentality, people counting me out and everything. So I love that type of mentality. And then just the fact of his loyalty so far as well, being the very first commit that we ever got under Neil Brown, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It was him or Reese Smith, one of the two. So, and still sticking around all this time and waiting his turn. You got to love to see that. But what do you think of that comment from Forrest, Brad? I think that's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially you've got a couple guys here that have been critical of the lack of progression that we've seen from some of the guys under Neil Brown. It was shocking to see such progression from last year to this year, which is, I think, what builds that kind of excitement. And try as I might to not get excited because of the stuff we've seen in the past, Garrett Green's got me a little excited.
Same here. I'm starting to get excited about the season, Brad. That's one thing I was talking about. I think it was on the last stream, man. Is, once last season ended, I was bitter. I was like, I'll never believe, their stuff again. Cause last season, everything they sold us on that didn't turn out. And now here we are, just already spring ball getting done. And I'm just sipping that gold blue Kool-Aid just a little bit, man. I'm starting to just snip it.
Yeah. You can see the positive sides. At least
I'm not sipping it yet. I'm definitely smelling it and starting to think about it.
It's just like looking at it. You're like SpongeBob in Sandy's cage. He's like, I need it.
Exactly.
You're on the first I need it. You're not to the eyes bulging out yet. You're definitely like, I need that.
Exactly. If Neil Brown can do anything, he can sell me so far. Even when I know he's trying to tell me.
As soon as he started doing interviews, man, he started doing them freaking press conferences every Tuesday.
It's all it takes.
Just like, looking good.
That's all it takes.
Improvement. I've not heard him say 6% body fat ever again. So,
yeah, I think they're going to stray away from saying anything's going to be the best or most improved or anything after the past couple of off seasons. So, hopefully they do anyway. Blake says he feels like since the loss at Oklahoma 2 seasons ago, Garrett could be the guy. The announcer compared him to a young Baker Mayfield because he does have the it factor. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we've been talking about is he definitely seems like he has a little bit of the it factor to him. That's why some people have been clamoring for him to play all along. Silas says, hey, all he'll rewatch after just got here. Silas, man, I was just talking about you. Appreciate you hopping in, and that's awesome, man. That's what the playback's for, though. But I was actually just mentioning you because your comment on the one video about the Baylor transfer wide receiver commit was actually the first time I heard about it. And then, of course, I had to do my research and then wanted to do a video about it. But then with it accompanied with the transfer portal news on the basketball side is why I kind of decided let's just do a stream. Let's do Q&A, get everybody's thoughts. So I appreciate you, man, being the first one to inform me of that, though, and appreciate you being here as always. And as I say that, I want to take one more time to remind you guys, if you're in here live watching us on the YouTube, or if you're tuning in on the playback on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, hit a like on the video. Really helps with the YouTube algorithm, helps get this out to more Mountaineer Nation, helps expand the Country Roads webcast community, which in turn, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. It helps us, helps us reach more Mountaineer Nation. And if you are subscribed, be sure to hit that notification bell as well. Notifies you times like this when we go live. Plenty more Q&A streams as we progress through the offseason, get ready for this upcoming football season. Speaking of which, Blake Green says he really likes Keyshawn Cobb and Montre Miller. I know we mentioned Montre Miller a little bit, but what do you think about Keyshawn Cobb at safety, Brad? I know we talked about him in the past. Maybe playing the spear position. I think that's still a possibility, but so far working at free safety right there behind Aubrey Burks, kind of spelling him and maybe going to be involved in one of the deep safety positions as well.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot about Cobb, but I remember him specifically making a play. And in my head, I was like, who is that? And then you said Cobb, and I was like, oh, it was a nice play. So, you impressed me with one play at least,
Oh, yeah.
So I can get on board with that.
Well, and I like the fact that they're potentially cross-training him because I think we already know he can play the spear, and just giving him experience at deep safety here in the spring is good. Even if they don't leave him there in the fall, like we talked about last year, injuries happen. So if you got guys that can slide over from one position to the other without creating those holes in the defense, like Jordan Leslie mentioned being an issue last season when the injuries started to pile up and they had to plug and play from other positions, they were putting more holes than they were helping. So I think in turn with that, cross-training some guys that are going to be experienced and can help you and are some of your more talented players that you've brought in. I think Keyshawn Cobb's up there on that list. I think it can only help you in the fall. And of course I'm a fan because his father has been here on the streams before and told us he's a fan of the channel and fan of the show. So definitely got to be a favorite of mine here on the Country Roads webcast. Keyshawn Cobb, definitely tuning in here. Might even have to give me a 23 jersey or something.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get you a 23 jersey.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, right? I'm going to have
Absolutely.
to. Shout out to the Cobb family. We love y'all over at the Country Roads webcast and hoping for a big year from Keyshawn. But let's see. BJ says, what do you guys think about our tight end, Cole Taylor? I feel like he could be a big key to this offense, especially around the red zone. Yeah, I definitely think he stood out all spring. We mentioned him being a pass catching threat, great size, 6'7". And one of the things that stood out to me, of course, it stood out watching it in the game, seeing the one-handed catch live. But then when I was watching the replay, getting to watch the broadcast, Rasheed Marshall was involved in the call there. And he said that one-handed catch that Cole Taylor brought in is something that he's done all spring. And we've seen him do it at least 2 times. They put out the highlight throughout the spring of him doing it, Brad. But in my eyes, if I'm giving my opinion on Cole Taylor, I think you're looking at what's going to be, and of course it's not maybe saying much, but I think it's definitely the best pass catching tight end we've had in the Neil Brown era, and one of the best we've had in past decade or so, maybe.
Yeah, I'm definitely giving him a good old 2 thumbs up here.
Yeah,
love that. Big dude that could catch. Plus, he's going to probably be a monster blocking. Yeah, give me 3 more of those guys.
Well, and I think the way that West Virginia is setting up this offense, it's going to give defenses trouble if everything works out according to plan, if some of these speedy guys pan out and you got the guys that can take the top off or hurt on RPO, glance, slant passes, etc. And then you got a guy like Cole Taylor who you can slip down the seam on an RPO and stuff because just, West Virginia's pounding away at you all game. And they're doing it from a specific formation and they keep giving you that same look. And so finally you're pinning your ears back. They give you the same look, slip Cole Taylor behind your linebackers, fake the handoff, pop it out there on the RPO. I think there's a lot of potential for Cole Taylor to be, I don't want to say a big play threat, but I definitely think there's a role for him in this offense. And I could see him catching 30 passes.
Yeah, and I definitely could see our offense is supposed to be multi-dimensional, it feels like, you know. We're supposed to be able to hit you from anywhere and everywhere all at once, you know, and got to keep you on your toes. And it's probably a hard offense to run, you know, trying to have, you know, all these options and different things that you can run and do. But if you can get it all working right, man, it's going to be really hard to prep for. It's going to be really, really, really hard to plan around.
It is because, and then I think that's just, of course, not even mentioning the added fact of having Garrett Green down at quarterback. In the past, West Virginia's running a run play. You know it's going to the running back. You can send that defensive end shooting in. Nobody's pulling that out. Now Garrett Green can pull that out. He can run. You're going to have to count for that. And then you're going to have to count for that third option being, you know, whether it's Cole Taylor slipping out from the tight end spot or one of the wide receivers running a route there on that run play as well. So like you said, it's going to be interesting to see if everything goes according to plan. I think we could see one of the better offenses we've seen since Nils Brown's been here. It's certainly shaping up to have that potential. I think we're definitely looking at the best offensive line we've had since then. Of course, the running back room's deep that we've talked about. I think it's really dependent on the passing game's time, the wide receivers and the transfer pieces that we've brought in at those skill positions, tight end, wide receiver, etc., all getting chemistry, much like we talked about on the basketball side. That's what's going to really determine this team's success, I think. Because I don't have any doubts about the run game.
Yeah, me either. I'm saying then you're also adding people like Rodney Gallagher.
Yep.
And Traylon Ray. You know, you got some talented guys still coming in. We've got a lot of quick twitch, a lot of tall length, speed, big bodies, big line. Our offensive line is probably the deepest it's ever been, and since I've been watching, especially throughout like the Dana Holgorsen years, this has to be the deepest line in a while.
Probably in the Big 12. Since we've been in the Big 12, I would say definitely it's got to be. It's definitely gonna be the best one since at least 2016, which was the last offensive line that I really loved. That was the Ron Crook offensive line. Skylar Howard, Wendell Smallwood, etc. Most successful season in number of wins that we've had in the Big 12, of course, that year. And so that gives you hope. And I definitely hope that this offensive line is just as good as that one was. And hopefully West Virginia's run game is just as good as that team was. And, you know, talking about pick your poison, that's kind of how that team ended up winning the games that they did. They had, you know, what was the Big 12's leading rusher in Wendell Smallwood, and then still threw for over 3,000 yards from the quarterback position and 30 touchdowns passing as well. So it was really a team that could hurt you both ways. And hopefully that's what West Virginia is trying to cultivate this season as well. Blake Green says, talking about Jashawn Polk, another transfer that we've brought in from Kent State. Of course, we know West Virginia adding some transfer wide receivers to help them. Devin Carter probably going to be number one target this season. And then, of course, we just recently brought in Ellis on the outside. Polk's going to be more of a slot guy, but also I think he's got a great chance to factor in as the team's primary kick and punt returner. West Virginia really looking to add some explosives there to the return spots. But talking about Polk, Blake says, if you look at his stats, they're not big numbers, but he did put them up in only like 5 games. He can be solid in the receiving game, especially in the return game. Yeah, I definitely think he was added for his return abilities primarily, but West Virginia does need some help at the slot receiver position. They lost pretty much all their experience there last season. We've seen Jeremiah Aaron kind of be the primary one used in the spring game and throughout the spring, and he's certainly the favorite at one of those 2 inside wide receiver positions. And then, of course, Rodney Gallagher that we mentioned, I think is going to factor in, but Polk's certainly going to be involved there, and he's going to see the field there. I like his potential. I think he's got a little bit of quick twitch to him. We'll see what happens with the receiving game. Love him in the return game, though. Brad, any thoughts on Polk?
Yeah, no, he looks good. So not too much to go off of that, though.
I feel that. Forrest says, by the way, I think Doege's influence really helped Green understand the physical and mental work that is necessary. Yeah, I think so. When you're sitting behind a veteran guy, Doege had been around college football forever and then still even continued to be after he left here. It can only help your young quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah, definitely not a bad guy to sit behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Love him or hate him, he definitely had the experience to know what to do at this level when it came to getting onto the field, being quarterback one, because he had done it a couple of different stops at that point. Blake said, would love to see the first recruit for Neil be the one to save his job. Wouldn't that be awesome? Silas loves Greens. Silas says he loves Garrett Green's energy. You could feel it when he came in to beat Oklahoma last season in the stadium. I just worry with his running style, can he stay healthy? yeah, I guess that's, another point you got to discuss is, if he can stay healthy. Don't want him to take too many hits, but I think they're going to kind of hopefully coach him up to slide a little bit, get out of bounds, not take too many hits. And I think West Virginia's running back room is deep enough that they're not going to rely on too many designed quarterback runs and too many read option calls per game where he'll have to, have the option to pull it. And then of course, you got to account for him doing it on his own as well. But I think, what do you think, Brad? Maybe they'll limit it to, 10 at most carries per game, try and rushing wise for Garrett Green, try and limit the possibility of him being injured, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a thing. Plus, with him shoring up his throwing game a little bit, that's also going to eliminate some of his need to run and scramble. So that's going to save him a couple extra hits there too and help him stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. Luke Bart says, "Sup, fellas?" What's going on, Luke? Appreciate you being in here, man, as always. And with that, going to get ready to close out here before too much longer, guys, but drop any final thoughts you got there in the chat, any final questions, comments, concerns, touch on them here before we close out, whether it be about the WVU basketball transfer we brought in and Raekwon Battle, WVU football transfer we lost and Jalen Shelton, the one we brought in and Jalen Ellis, or any other things WVU related or otherwise you want to drop in there as we get ready to close out this Q&A stream here on the Country Roads webcast here before too much longer, but definitely covered all of those aforementioned topics. If you're just joining us here late, you want to catch the playback, you can definitely do that. And I'll probably put some form of this audio up on the podcast platforms as well. You can find us on any of those there. Just search Country Roads Webcast. Recently added iHeartRadio and Amazon Music to the arsenal there. So definitely double-digit podcast platforms you can find us on podcast-wise. But definitely been a fun one, Brad. Appreciate you definitely hopping on this one. But
absolutely,
anything that we hadn't touched on that you wanted to mention before we got here? I know I got a couple notes I'm going to slide in here at the end, but wanted to give you a chance to touch on anything you had that maybe we hadn't brought up along the way.
I do feel like we've neglected the defense a little bit, or the rest of the defense a little bit. One guy I want to give a shout out that I think that is, to me, done the same transformation that Garrett Green has done on the defensive side of the ball is Lee Pogba. Yeah. That guy, his body looks completely different than what he looked last year. And he looked like he was ready to lead the defense. And I think that he's going to step in and really be that person that we heard he could be last year. Right. He may have not lived up to those expectations just yet, but I think he's got a really good chance to put his name out there this year and get known.
I think so too. I like, we were talking about the will linebacker position and, I got my questions there just because of the inexperience. But overall, just the talent that West Virginia has at the position, they lack in experience. They make up for in the young talent and potential. They have there.
Yeah, there's just so much potential.
Yeah, I mean, even Ben Cutter had a sack in the spring game. He's a true freshman, might play a little bit this season. And then we've already talked about Trey Lathan and Jaffa Ferris there. And then Lee Pogba, like you said, I think he has all Big 12 type potential. Last year he played a ton. Hopefully this year they're going to be able to spell him a little bit so they can keep him more fresh and have him out there at full speed at all times. I think sometimes late in games last year he was maybe getting worn down a little bit too much. Hopefully that's going to help his play as well. But I definitely agree. Certainly transformed himself, and I think he's got potential to be a really good player there at the Mike linebacker position for the Mountaineers. So definitely wanted to bring that up. Glad you brought up the defense.
Defensive line too. I feel like Hammond Russell and Mike Lockhart, I think that those are two dudes that are going to be really good at what they do. They might not be as noticeable as Akeem Mesidor or Jordan Jefferson.
Right.
I don't think that you're going to see them making as big of plays, but I think that they are going to make more plays that they just don't go noticed for. I think that they're really going to clog up holes and create some havoc down low and in the center for teams that we play this year and allow the rest of our team to really shine. So I think that those two also, because Hammond Russell looked good. I'm excited to see him finally get some of his play because he's been working hard for it.
Great shout out there. And I like the way you turned it, have others make plays, them clog up holes and stuff. Cause I think that's, like you said, that may be the type of thing where it's not really going to show up on the stat sheet necessarily. But I think both those guys are going to play a role. West Virginia, of course, needing to replace that nose tackle for the second, consecutive season, losing Akeem Mesidor a couple years ago, Jordan Jefferson this year, as you mentioned. And those are the two guys that are going to do it for the Mountaineers, Mike Lockhart and Hammond Russell. So good to see both of those guys progressing well. And I think I'm kind of excited about West Virginia's D-line quietly. I know we've lost kind of our big names from last season. Of course, talking about Dante Stills, one of the best to ever do it. But then, of course, Jordan Jefferson hitting the portal. Some people are kind of worried. But I like the names that we've got, the guys you mentioned at the nose tackle position. Then at the D tackle position, I love Eddie V. We've seen his potential. And then Day Hawkins, I think quietly is one of the more underrated transfers West Virginia's brought in because people saw Tennessee State and weren't thinking much of him. But I've heard reports throughout the spring that he's constantly getting pressure, pass game, doing great plays in the run game as well. So you love those guys as your tackles. And then defensive end, we know Sean Martin's probably going to be the leader, but I thought it was telling that he mentioned Torres Simmons as one of the most improved players he thought on the team. Sean Martin saying that personally in one of the Country Roads Trust interviews throughout the spring. So there's 6 guys, a 2 deep at each position right there with those guys. And that's not even adding guys that were, not available for the spring that I think got really bright futures when you're talking Zakee Lawton, Jalen Thornton, and Asani Redwood, who's a guy I know you love, Brad. So I think West Virginia's D-line has potential to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that they have not been talked about enough, I'll say, because of, the uncertainty there. But I think that they really were noticeable in the spring game, myself personally.
I think so too. I'm glad you brought that up. Glad you mentioned the defense a little bit. And that's just kind of one thing I wanted to touch on because I know we were talking a little bit about the spring game, and I just kind of took some notes because I know we were talking a little about the first team out, second team out. So for people that might be interested as far as who came out as quote unquote starters in the spring game and what kind of the first and second team was, I just kind of on the rewatch paused it, kind of take some notes to list a little bit of what may be a little bit of a too deep right now. Post-spring, of course, this is subject to major change. We got transfers coming in. We got freshmen coming in. But as far as the spring game, this is kind of what we saw. First team offense, of course, quarterback was Garrett Green. Then you had 2 running backs on the field, C.J. Donaldson and Tony Mathis. 2 outside wide receivers were Cortez Braham and Devin Carter. Then you had Cole Taylor, and actually on the first play, he was lined up in the slot rather than attached at tight end. The offensive line going across, of course, Zach Frazier didn't really play a lot in the spring. So left tackle, Wyatt Milam, left guard, Thomas Remick, center, Brandon Yates, right guard, Jaquay Hubbard, right tackle, Doug Nestor. And then some of the people that came in quick was, of course, Traylon Davis subbing in at tight end, Tony Mathis subbing in at running back, and Jeremiah Aaron coming in as the first wide receiver to play in the slot when they put a slot receiver in. Defensively, the first team that you saw out there, Torres Simmons at defensive end, Mike Lockhart at nose tackle, Eddie V at defensive tackle, Jared Bartlett at bandit, Andrew Wilson-Lamp at one cornerback spot, Malachi Ruffin at the other. Mike linebacker, the aforementioned Lee Koba. Spear was Lance Dixon, the first one out there. Trey Lathan starting at the will linebacker spot. And then the 2 safeties, Aubrey Burks and Marcus Floyd. First player subbed in, though, the aforementioned Hammond Russell. Like you said, him and Mike Lockhart probably going to split time at that nose tackle spot. And then as far as the second team units we saw trot out for the Mountaineers, just to wrap up the spring game lineup. Second team offense, quarterback Nico, of course. Running back was Jalen Anderson. Wide receivers on the outside, Preston Fox on one side, Hudson Clement on the other side. Bit of the in-state flavor there. And then in the slot, you saw Jarrell Williams, who actually I was surprised to see working in the slot. Looks like he's going to be a slot guy for the Mountaineers rather than an outside guy like I thought he would be. And then tight end, I thought interesting, Will Dixon's already climbed above, the international player Victor Wickstrom and some others that West Virginia had there at the position. Looks like he's kind of the third tight end in the pecking order behind the transfer Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis, who we knew was there. Then the second team offensive line, we saw left tackle Johnny Williams, left guard Bryce Biggs, the center, Charlie Katarinchik, who's actually working there, him, Landon Livingston, Brandon Yates, Doug Nestor were the kind of the ones you saw get snaps at center throughout the spring with Zach Frazier out. Sully Weedman at right guard, Nick Malone at right tackle. And then second team defense, Braden Dudley on the defensive end, Hammond Russell nose tackle, Day Hawkins defensive tackle, Bandit James Hurd Jr., true freshman, going to be used sparingly in the pass rushing game, I think, for the Mountaineers. Mike linebacker, Tariq Austin Cave there, the transfer from Miami, hoping he plays a bigger role this season. Will linebacker, Jaffa Veras, who we talked about a little bit earlier. 2 cornerbacks, Montre Miller and Jacoby Spells. Hershey McLaurin on as the second team spear. Then the 2 safeties, Keyshawn Cobb at the free safety and Christian Stokes at the cat safety. First sub-ins on those units were Raleigh Collins getting some action at spear and Caden Beiser at the Mike linebacker spot. So just wanted to run down a little bit of the lineups. I know I'm a fan of that type of stuff, so hopefully somebody else is and nobody's eyes glazed over. But any thoughts there on lineups, Brad?
Yeah, and Sean Martin was out too.
Yeah, Sean Martin out as well.
He didn't play.
Definitely. Injury updates. Nobody really, I think, out extensively. Everybody should be good to go by the time fall camp rolls around. We know the ones that were out for the spring. Of course, I talked a little bit earlier about Jalen Thornton, Asani Redwood, Davis Mallinger, we knew. Zach Frazier sat out kind of precautionary. Deshaun Polk dealing with a little bit of injury. He didn't play in the spring game. Sean Martin didn't play in the spring game. So I think that's the only ones off the top of my head that didn't play in the spring game, really, but that we'll see come in the fall. But any other thoughts, Brad? I'm going to catch up with some of these comments, but you got anything else?
No, I'm good. Go ahead.
All right, let's catch up on some comments and then get up out of here before too much longer. Appreciate the engagement. Been another great Q&A stream. More of these coming in the future. But Blake Green says, really reminds me of some of the Skylar Howard's teams, I guess, talking about this year's team and how it's shaping up. Definitely 100% right there with you, Blake. I've mentioned that in the past, that I think that's kind of, I'm not saying that they're modeling this team after the 2016 team, but to me, that's kind of just how I'm expecting. I'm not talking about the whole team, but offensively, that's what I'm expecting this year's team to look like a lot, Brad. That year, West Virginia used air raid concepts in the passing game, route tree wise, etc., but then had a great running quarterback that could hurt you with his legs.
Very similar indeed.
Yeah, very similar build. So hopefully you get the similar success that you have with that team. Cliffhanger says, take care. Let's go Mountaineers. Let's go Mountaineers indeed, Cliff. Appreciate you coming in. Have a good one. Four says, since Markiel was younger, the change between Harrell and Reagan may affect him more. Reagan isn't as simplistic as Harrell, and Markiel working to develop into a more complete player. Great point. I didn't even think about that, having to change really quickly like that from first season to second season. That might be affecting him more than we've realized as well.
Definitely.
Good point for us. Good point. Blake says he really thinks this year's defense will be better. Right now, I tend to agree with you. I think we've done a better job in the transfer portal. What do you think, Brad?
In the words of Neil Brown, when he was asked about the running game after his first year, if it's going to be better, it better be.
It's got to be for this team to be better. The secondary's got to improve, but I think it will. And I think I really saw some things in the spring game that I liked. If you guys haven't yet, check out a video I did on the channel, top 5 defensive plays. I did one for both offensive and defensive side, but the defensive plays, that's really what I tried to highlight because that's what I was watching with secondary play. And to me, there were some good things, especially on defending deep balls. Montre Miller stood out in particular to me, but Neil Brown even mentioned that as well, that's what they kind of tried to focus on. They struggled with last year defending streaks and stuff. So they were attacked in that way in the spring game, and I thought responded well. And so I think it, like you said, it has to be better, but I don't see how it couldn't be better either, really, if I'm being honest.
Definitely.
We know how bad last year's struggles were. Then Chris D, appreciate you, man, tuning in and chiming in. Did Jimmy Bell get any reps? Just curious. Yes, Jimmy Bell played late third quarter, most of the fourth quarter, played right tackle. I'd say anywhere from 10 to 20 snaps, somewhere in there he probably played. I watched him closely for the first 4 to 5 snaps, and I thought he looked a lot better than I thought he would for someone that hadn't played football in so long. Did good in pass protection, did get the holding penalty that one time. That was the only penalty West Virginia gave up in the game, which was a bright spot. But so that was a struggle. But I think personally, I'm just reading the tea leaves. I think he sticks with football. Brad, what do you think about Jimmy Bell on the football squad?
I don't know. He looked like he didn't know how to use his hands, which is just not playing in a while. And he's got a long way to go, but I don't get paid enough money to make that decision. So,
right. Just judging by Neil Brown's comments, I didn't think that he said anything that would lead me to believe that they would tell him not to continue with the team. I think that it sounded more like we're going to have a conversation and probably will. And I think the fact of, I know that West Virginia had lost an offensive lineman in Donovan Beaver that had been there at tackle. West Virginia needs depth at that tackle spot maybe. So, and it's also a situation where they might not have to use a scholarship either. You could do one of the things where NIL could potentially cover his tuition, like I talked about on the basketball side. So, personally, like I said, I don't have any insight to the situation whatsoever, purely speculative, but I think you'll see Jimmy Bell play football this season. Don't know if he'll play basketball as well, but I think he'll stick with football and you'll see him continue with the team in fall camp. Blake Green says he thinks Ruffin deserves some respect too. Good point. Glad you mentioned that. I think that he's really developed, went from preferred walk-on, had to be called on last season. And I think, coming out with the first team, and he made some plays in the spring game in the one-on-ones. He had an interception, and he was one of the ones that broke up one of the deep balls, also highlighted in that top 5 defensive plays video I did. But what are your thoughts on Malachi Ruffin, Brad? Do you think he's got a legitimate chance to be one of the starting corners?
I do. I think that he got exposed some last year, but I think that he learned from that. So,
I think so too. I think he's well endowed in that competition. He's got a great chance, and he's really improved. I think particularly, like you said, struggled early, but in those games, the wins against Oklahoma, both those Oklahoma teams, I think that it really showed how much he had progressed, and he made some plays that helped West Virginia be able to win those games. BJ says, do y'all know what kind of injury Josiah Trotter actually had? I don't know exactly. They said lower leg. I'm guessing it's probably ACL or something. I'm like I said, I don't want to speculate too much HIPAA laws and stuff or whatever. But if I was a betting man, I would say it's something knee related probably, because I know he had surgery not too long thereafter. Brad, you got any other insight?
Mm-mm.
That's what I thought. They're pretty vague on that because they kind of have to be with like them being college students and the HIPAA and all that stuff. So they'll usually just say lower leg or whatever. But that's what I'm guessing anyway. Charles Peterson, way too early predictions week 1. Well, I know Penn State's favored by, was it 17 or 19, something that opened way too early line that opened up. So definitely going to be facing an uphill battle for week 1. But I'm expecting, hopefully the rivalry game is a motivating factor. It being a top, 15, top 10 team, whatever Penn State ends up as, being a motivating factor. Night game, primetime television, looks like it's going to be on NBC. That's what reports are coming out. So I'm hoping West Virginia stays, within, if that's how big the spread's going to be, is double digits or 14 points. Hopefully West Virginia can beat that. That's what I'll say, way too early. But, you want our extensive thoughts, wait for the season prediction roundtable in a couple months. Brad, you got anything else, though, on that week 1?
Nope, I'll double the sentiment. Wait for the roundtable.
Season prediction roundtable coming out in August. One of our favorite podcast episodes always to do. We'll go through the schedule, break it down game by game there, Charles. So you'll hear extensive thoughts then. But of course, we'll have thoughts in the meantime and in between time until we get there. But Chris D, did Jashir Cox graduate? He was a dog. I was a fan of him as well. Thought he really came on late last season. But yes, unfortunately, he did graduate. So looking to break in someone else to spear position. You got Lance Dixon there. Hershey McLaurin's moved there. Raleigh Collins, a young guy, playing there as well. Chris D says, you guys are great. Thanks for the coverage. Really appreciate that, Chris. Means a lot.
Appreciate it, Chris.
Blake Green says running clock might help us if we're going to be a run-heavy team. Yeah, that's definitely, I guess, one final news thing we can mention here. The NCAA did approve the rule change. Clock's going to run after first downs now. First down no longer stopping the clock in college football, except for in the final 2 minutes of the second and fourth quarters. They're still going to stop it on fourth downs. But, yeah, interesting, Blake. Could help us. I don't know. We'll have to see how it factors, if it changes the game any, if at all. But it's going to be something that's going to be an adjustment for sure. Any thoughts on the rule change, Brad?
Definitely going to be different.
Going to be different, and it's going to be a different type of season for West Virginia as they're breaking in a lot of new faces, whether it be young guys that we haven't really seen play too much or some of these transfers that we've covered here on this Q&A stream. But like I said, I'm getting excited for it. I think Brad's, starting to come around a little bit too, maybe even. So who knows? But we got plenty of time to cover it moving ahead. Like I said, we're going to have podcast episodes coming out, plenty of coverage here on the channel, plenty more Q&A streams, going to try and keep them going. Hopefully weekly as much as we possibly can, but definitely let's stay tuned here. Stay subbed up on YouTube. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram's Country Roads Webcast. Twitter, you can see on the screen there at the bottom now, at WVU Country Roads. And then, of course, follow Brad, one of our great co-hosts here, helps cover us, do a lot of coverage for us, at Big Bubba Brad, CRW there on Twitter. As you see there, give him a chance to plug that, of course. But anything else you want to plug or anything else you want to mention, Brad, we'll get up out of here before until next time.
No, I'm hoping to be around more guys. I say I'm actually starting a new job, so once that gets squared away, maybe I'll be back around a little bit more, hoping that I'll be a little bit more free with my time.
Nice. Love to hear it. Love when we all get together. The more the merrier is what I always say here on the channel, of course. So it's always fun with these Q&A streams too, getting to interact with you guys, and then it just makes it a lot of fun here with, like I said, the more the merrier. Can't put it any other way than that, really, I guess. Silas, good to see you too. Chris says you guys have membership options. Chris, we're very close to having membership options. We're about 100 or so subscribers away from the 1K here on YouTube, which we're going to have a celebration stream when that happens, guys, of course.
Absolutely.
But when we do that, we are going to have some membership options, going to have some tiers set up and stuff. I'm thinking we're going to go more so Patreon than doing YouTube membership, but we may explore both options. Patreon's going to be really cheap, guys. I'm talking like $1 a month, and we're going to have exclusive stuff on there like film reviews, commentaries for old West Virginia games, commentaries for new West Virginia games, all kinds of fun stuff that'll be exclusive to Patreon, maybe even some Patreon exclusive streams. So once we hit 1K, look for our social media for announcements on that. But definitely appreciate that, Chris. Love the support, and appreciate you offering, and we'll definitely be in touch when that does become available, and we'll be able to help you guys have even better content once we do have those monetary options here coming in the near future from us on the Country Roads Webcast. But really appreciate you asking there, Chris D. Cliffhanger says, love to see West Virginia be in Penn State, especially prime time. First game going to be a tough one. Yeah, nationally ranked, and I'm excited for it, though. I'm excited for it. Charles says, welcome back, Brad. Indeed. Glad to have you back, brother. Glad to have you back. BJ says, thought we did really good not having many penalties in the spring game. Hopefully it carries over to the season. Absolutely. Got to have improvement there. Penalties, mental mistakes been a big issue during the Neil Brown era, so got to get that corrected. But having said that, guys, we're going to get up out of here. Been with you guys for a while. Appreciate the engagement. Love when it goes long like this, and stay with you guys even longer. Like I said, hopefully the more the channel grows, we'll be here who knows how long. But like I said, who knows how long the streams will get there. But as long as you guys are here and enjoying them, we'll keep them coming. But Brad, appreciate you hopping in here with me, and
glad to be back.
Look forward to more in the future. Indeed, always better with you. And like I said, the more the merrier. So plenty more content coming from me, coming from Brad, all of us here at the Country Roads webcast team. Basketball news, more transfers coming in, hopefully, and football as well as we continue to build the roster heading through this off season. Getting set and getting excited for the 2023, Mountaineer football season. Let's not skip this year and get ahead. Let's get through this year first. Hopefully you have a successful one, but we'll be here to cover it as we progress through the off season, and of course cover it once the season comes around as well. Appreciate you guys tuning in. For Bradley, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.